quick announcement for everybody before we get into this whole mess. I need to start apologizing because in the past 2 videos that I have made on this woman, I have pronounced her name like Jen Sincero. Her name is actually Jen Sincero. I pronounced it wrong. It is Italian. Somebody corrected me in the comments, and then I watched some videos of her speaking, and I listened to one of her audiobooks, and yeah, her name is Jen Sincero. Jen, I genuinely apologize to you. People pronounce my name wrong all the time, and that wasn't cool of me, so hope you can accept my apology on that. Alright, I'm done being nice to Jen Sincero for the rest of the day. What's up, my fellow small business supporters? I'm Savvy, and today we are going to be reviewing Jen Sincero's best-selling book of all time, and thank God it is not The Straight Girl's Guide to Sleeping with Chicks. Yes, that is really one of Jen Sincero's books. If you haven't already seen my review of The Straight Girl's Guide to Sleeping with Chicks, it's linked up in the cards, and we just had a discussion about it on Your Morning Guru. By the way, we studied Jen Sincero on Your Morning Guru this past week. Subscribe to the second channel and all that shit. No, today we are going to be reviewing this book of hers, You Are a Neurotypical: How to Completely Ignore the Existence of Things like Clinical Depression or OCD or Intrusive Thoughts or Other Neurodivergencies in favor of choosing to believe that you have complete control over your own thoughts and your own life. We are gonna read You Are a Badass at Basically Ripping Off the Secret: How to Victim Blame Other People for Everything That Has Gone Wrong in Their Own Lives. We are going to be reviewing You Are a Manic Pixie Dream Girl: The Story of How Once Upon a Time, a movie executive hired Zooey Deschanel to play Rachel Hollis in a movie and told her, play the character exactly like you played her in New Girl, except make her like 10,000 times more annoying and make her bangs even longer. And that is how Jen Sincero was born. Today, we are reviewing, I think that on Your Morning Guru, RK summed it up the best when he said, this book should just be called You Are a Bad Book.
Hit you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should take up lesbianism.
Chicago.
You guys asked for it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome for the first time. I'm Savvy. This intro is going to be super short because we have so much to get through in this book. There's a lot to unpack here! But all the usual stuff. If you're watching this video and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe because every Friday morning at 11 a.m. Central Time, I put out new videos about books and business. I also live stream or put out bonus videos on Mondays as well. And I have a second channel, as I mentioned earlier, Your Morning Guru, where we follow business gurus every week. We followed Jen Sincero this past week, and I've got to say, friendship ended with bashing Rachel Hollis. Bashing Jen Sincero is my new best friend. Part 1 of this video, girl, get an editor. So yeah, this book is not called Girl Wash Your Face, Girl Stop Apologizing, but I still thought Girl Get an Editor was a great thing to call the part of the video where we're just gonna talk about the terrible writing and editing in this book. Remember the other week when I made a video about how Simon & Schuster is a terrible company? And in that video, I talked about the huge issue that I have with people saying that self-publishing isn't legitimate, or that small press books or that new ways of getting your books out into the world are less legitimate than getting a big contract with a Simon & Schuster or Penguin Random House or Macmillan type of company. Well, one of the big 5 publishing houses published this book, that is Hachette Group. While The Straight Girl's Guide to Sleeping with Chicks was published by Simon & Schuster, this book was published by Hachette, and I believe You Are a Badass at Making Money was published by Penguin Random House, although I'm not positive on that one just yet. We will be reviewing You Are a Badass at Making Money in the future. We studied Jen Sincero on Your Morning Guru this week. We read that book as well, and it's even worse than this one somehow, if you can believe it. We will be touching on money a little bit later in this video. However, my whole point with all of this was to say that this is yet another example of showing how big publishing houses do not guarantee quality. Oh, and by the way, if you have this book, please feel free to follow along at home. I will be giving page numbers as we go throughout this. Page 49 was when the bad writing really started to sink in for me. The pages before this were bad, but I didn't mark up a whole lot before that in the book, not because it was any good, but because I was like, yeah, I've heard this before. Yeah, Rachel Hollis said that. Yeah, Grant Cardone said that. Yeah, I heard that in a million other books. It was just the same bullshit over and over again. In the spirit of highlighting some of the bad writing, I do want to point out at the paragraph at the top of the page, pointing out some of the business guru magnetic poetry in this book. Self-perception is a zoo. We spend our lives drifting between glimpses of our own infinite glory and the fear that not only are we totally incapable, unworthy, lazy, horrible, but that it's only a matter of time before someone blows the whistle on us. We torture ourselves incessantly, and for what purpose? If we can glimpse the glory, and I know you can, why do we waste our precious time giving any energy to the other options? Wouldn't life be so much more fun, productive, and sexy if we fully embraced our magnificently delightful selves? And I was like, thanks, I'm cured. That's just business guru magnetic poetry right there. One of the worst pieces of writing I've ever read. Word salad is the only way I can describe this. It says right here, it's just as easy to believe we're awesome as it is to believe we're giant sucking things. Let me read that again. It's just as easy to believe we're awesome as it is to believe we're giant sucking things. What? So it took me a while. I think what she's doing here is using sucking as an adjective for things and saying, we might believe that we are just things in the universe that suck. We might believe we're things that suck. Is that what she means by giant sucking things? Because at first I thought she was talking about like giants, the mythical creatures like Jack and the Beanstalk giant, and he's sucking things like you've got the Jack and the Beanstalk giant deep throating a big beanstalk. Like, is that what she meant? But then I'm like, oh no, she's using sucking as like I'm a sucking person, which doesn't make any sense. I guess you could say suckling, like we're sipping mommy milk. This book has melted my brain. I'm so sorry. But I was like, who approved that? Next piece of bad writing comes on page 122. And this is just like, the whole book is full of bad writing and editing. This is just like the most blatant examples that I could pull for you guys. These pages have the same mistake on both pages. Throughout this book, she uses a lot of these magnetic poetry type of words where she talks about the big snooze. And the big snooze is supposedly this idea of sleeping through life or letting life pass you by or whatever. And then she also talks about your higher self, which maybe it's because I'm not a super spiritual person or what, but I have no idea what your higher self is referring to. I think she talks about like how when you meditate, you reach your higher self, and your higher self is like where all the magic is. Anyway, on page 122, she says, lugging around guilt, shame, resentment, and self-loathing is the big snooze running the show, pitching a fit, demanding to be right and to be seen. Your higher self, on the other hand, could give a crap about what anybody else thinks or does because your higher self, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So my higher self gives a crap about this? So you're saying my higher self does give a crap about self-loathing? I thought you said before that my higher self is supposed... Then I realized she meant my higher self couldn't give a crap. But she said it the opposite way. Could you imagine if we just said things without saying not when we didn't mean not? Flashback to the LuLaRoe nodding. Could you imagine if I was like, You Are a Badass is a great book, when in reality I meant You Are a Badass is not a great book? She makes the same exact mistake on the next page, where she's talking about when you feel resentment or envy towards other people, and she says, why do you care if they understand how lame they are or not? What good does that do to you? And don't pretend it's because you want them to become a better person. You could care less. And I'm like, okay, if I could care less, that means I care somewhat. But then you then made it out to be like I didn't care. And I'm like, you meant you couldn't care less. When you're doing this in a professional book, there is absolutely no reason to make that mistake twice right in a row. Next mistake! On page 132, we have a comma splice. This is definitely not the only comma splice in this book. There are tons of them. And by the way, just so everybody knows, just so I can preempt any criticism I might get, sometimes when I reply to people's tweets or Instagram comments, I use comma splices as well. I'm really sorry about that, but I think that when you're typing on social media versus in a professionally published book, it's completely different. Anyway, so what she says here on page 132 is, talk to strangers. We're all family on this planet. That's supposed to be a semicolon there, Jen. Quick lesson. Hot English teacher savvy is in the house. I'm not just your gay aunt from the 80s today. I'm not just your toxically masculine MILF or your gender non-conforming girl boss or your big titty tomboy GF. Today I'm also your sexy English teacher. And today your sexy English teacher is here to explain to you how commas versus semicolons work. In the English language, when we're putting a sentence together, we have two different things. One is called independent clauses and one is called dependent clauses. Just so anyone out there, I know sometimes people will be like, oh my god, Savvy, I already know this. Why are you talking to me like I'm in school? Like, if you already know this, I'm sorry. Some people don't and some people appreciate the knowledge. So like, whatever. Either way is fine. Skip this part if you don't like it. But you have independent and dependent clauses. Independent clauses are things that can stand on their own as a complete sentence. I'm wearing a jacket. That's a complete sentence. It can stand on its own. If I said, when it's cold outside, I'm wearing a jacket, then when it's cold outside cannot stand on its own, right? If I went up to you and said, when it's cold outside, you'd be like, when it's cold outside, what? That's because that's a dependent clause. It has a subject and a verb. However, in addition to the subject and verb, it also has the word when in front of it, which indicates that something else is coming. That's how you know it's a dependent clause, because it can't stand on its own. So if you have a dependent and an independent clause and you want to join them together, you join them with a comma. So you could say, when it's cold outside, I wear a jacket. You could say, I wear a jacket by itself, because that's an independent clause. Now, if you want to join two independent clauses, you can do that in a couple of ways. You can use a coordinating conjunction, which is a word like and or but, and then you would still use a comma in that case. So you could say, it is cold outside and I'm wearing a jacket. In that case, you would use a comma because you're using a coordinating conjunction. However, if you just want to join the two independent clauses of, it is cold outside and I am wearing a jacket, you could not conjoin those with a comma without a coordinating conjunction, because then you have what we call a run-on sentence. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what a run-on sentence means. A lot of people say a run-on sentence is a sentence that's too long, or people sometimes mark something as a run-on sentence when the sentence goes on for a long time. But just because a sentence is long doesn't necessarily make it a run-on sentence. If a sentence is long, you as an editor may still want to ask the author to break it apart or trim it down because it might be confusing for the reader, but it's not necessarily a run-on technically. A run-on sentence is a sentence where you have independent clauses joined without proper punctuation or coordinating conjunctions. So, in this case, if Jen says, talk to strangers, that sentence can stand on its own, right? So that's an imperative sentence that can stand on its own. The implied subject is you, the verb is talk. So it's talk to strangers, sentence on its own. And then we're all family on this planet, that's also a sentence on its own. There's no when or if or things like that, or words that would indicate a dependent clause. So if it says talk to strangers, we could say talk to strangers, comma, because we're all family on this planet. That would be a way to conjoin those two and make it right without making it a run-on. If you want to conjoin two independent clauses, and you don't want to use a word like because or and or but or so or things like that, you can use a semicolon. That is what a semicolon is for. It is for conjoining two independent clauses. Semicolons also have additional uses as well, but I'm not going to be sexy English teacher all day long, so we can go into that at another time. But here you could say talk to strangers, semicolon. We're all family on this planet. And that would perfectly solve the issue. I see this issue in Rachel Hollis's books too. I don't know why no one edits these books. Anyway, that was the next thing. I hope everyone enjoyed that lesson on how to avoid comma splices and run-on sentences. Next problem is on page 221, and when I read you where the grammar mistake is, you're gonna be like, ooh, this entire section, the content of it is problematic. Don't worry, we will be getting into that. In this section, Jen is talking about how you're envisioning and trying to vision board and manifest what you want for the future. We've all heard that shit before, right? She gives an example of how you might visualize that and what you might say to yourself or write in a letter to yourself to try to make that happen. You want to make $150,000 this year so that you can donate some of that money to help schools in Kenya. So in the visualization of wanting to help the schools in Kenya, I see the faces of the kids in Kenya as write on the chalkboard in the school I've helped pay for. I think she means as they write on? As the students write on? She just forgot a word, and no editor caught that. It'd be one thing if this was one or two things, but this is a Big Five publishing company. There are 2 million copies of this book sold. This is a New York Times bestseller, and over here we have yet another typo. The last one that caught my eye was on page 242, where she's talking about her grandma. She was eternally adorned in a cardigan pinned together at the top by an antique brooch. The word brooch has 2 different meanings and 2 different spellings. Brooch, spelled B-R-O-A-C-H, is a verb. It means to broach a subject or something like that. And that is how she spelled it here. B-R-O-O-C-H is a noun. And that's what you use to talk about a pin that someone puts on their sweater. Completely different word. And she used the wrong one. So, good job, Jen. Good job, Jen's editors. Girl, get an editor. We are going to head into part 2 of this video, the law of attraction, pseudoscience, and victim blaming. In the past, we've talked about the book The Secret. I reviewed it when I did my business guru tier ranking video, and I also reviewed it on the Your Morning Guru show when we followed the law of attraction for a week. But that book is full of victim blaming bullshit, and the book The Secret by Rhonda Byrne makes it very clear how staying in a law of attraction type of mindset not only doesn't work, but it also can lead to a lot of victim blaming. The whole idea of the book is that when we think positively, we send out electromagnetic frequencies from our brains that vibrate with the universe, and that it magnetically attracts good things to happen to us in our lives. It doesn't make any sense at all. But some people truly believe in this, and Jen is one of them. In The Secret, the author even brings up the idea of you can't just magnetically attract everything to you, right? Because if you did, then people who had natural disasters that destroyed their homes, or people experiencing homelessness, people who died in a war, those people couldn't have manifested those things, right? And she was like, yeah, it's hard to believe, but actually they did. Those people weren't thinking positively enough. And if they had been thinking positively and attracting magnetically the right things with the universe, so like literally, it's everything that goes wrong in your life is your fault alone. One person that we had on Your Morning Guru as a guest talked about how when she was a Mormon and when she used to be in MLMs, she was made to read The Secret and talk about the law of attraction, and how the law of attraction was used to try to justify her SA. SA being an abbreviation for when someone does something physically to you without your consent. That happened to her, and people in her church who were following the law of attraction were trying to tell her, well, you must have subconsciously manifested it. The law of attraction is just so disgusting. I don't think there is a problem with positive thinking. If what's helping you is visualizing your goals, making a clear plan of action to get them, and then reminding yourself that you're capable of it and staying in a positive and motivated mindset, please do that, because it's wonderful. The problem is when you take it to the extreme and say that your thoughts are the only thing attracting things to other things. First of all, that's hell on people with OCD like me, who has intrusive thoughts. And now I'm thinking, oh my god, my brain, if I go off my medication for a day, my brain's gonna start thinking, Savvy, if you don't tap the dresser, everybody in your life is gonna die. And then suddenly I'm gonna start thinking that, now I'm gonna magnetically attract it to myself. Like, no, you just can't take it to that extreme. Ooh, I'm getting heated up. So let's talk about all the places where Jen makes it very clear that the law of attraction is everything. So on page 31, she basically kicks off the frame for the book as a whole, where she says, here's the foundation for all the work we're about to do together on your life. The universe is made up of source energy. All energy vibrates at a certain frequency, which means you're vibrating at a certain frequency. And everything you desire, don't desire, is also vibrating at a certain frequency. Jen, I think you might just be vibrating from all the straight sex you're having with other women. I just wrote citation needed, because how am I supposed to believe that if you can't explain it to me? In her money book, she justifies this by saying, well, just because you can't see God, or just because you can't see source energy or universal intelligence doesn't mean that it's not real, because we can't see gravity and most of us can't explain how it works, but we know it's real. We don't jump off cliffs, right? And I'm like, yeah, Jen, because there are people who know gravity and can explain it. Nobody can explain source energy. And I just want to be clear, I have no issue with spirituality. I have no issue with religion. I think religion, spirituality, and all of that can be wonderful. It works really great for some people, and it's not for other people, and that's totally fine. But Jen frames this book from the beginning as, you have to believe in some type of God. Then below it, she goes into, otherwise known as the law of attraction. The basic idea is focus on that which makes you feel good, and ye shall find attract that which makes you feel good. Then she says, which is why when you're vibrating at a high frequency, awesome things seem to flow effortlessly, and you seem to stumble over the perfect people and opportunities all the time, and vice versa. Source? Do you have any proof of this? You are a badass at pulling shit out of your ass. Page 125 is where the law of attraction bullshit changes from just useless bullshit into actually victim blaming harmful stuff. When someone does something awful to you, take that person out of the equation so you can open yourself up to have a more pleasant and productive reaction in life. It's not about them anyway, it's about you. If you have nobody to be angry at, it's hard to be angry. Instead, it opens the incident up for questioning. Why did this happen? How was I involved? Why did I attract this to myself? Jen, I think that depends entirely on what type of situation you're talking about here. If you're talking about a conflict where, say, your pizza delivery was an hour late, and now you're mad at the pizza shop or the pizza delivery driver or whatever, and you're like, okay, well, maybe if I stopped being mad at them and instead thought about, why it's important to have patience in life and made this about what I can learn, sure, okay, whatever. Maybe you can learn something good from that. Maybe it'll help you be a calmer person. Great. But there are ample situations where this does not apply. In some cases, the other person is just actually wrong. For example, cases of SA, cases of domestic violence, where it is more than justified to be mad at the other person and not think about how you attracted it to yourself. Oh my god! A couple weeks ago on this channel, we discussed how Jen recently spoke at the Zaya Active MLM conference, and on the Your Morning Guru show, we did a reaction to Jen giving a speech to Beachbody consultants. So Jen absolutely has been, getting paid to talk to MLMers and get them more into the positive thinking mindset so that they'll continue to spend more money on their MLM and not quit while they go deeper and deeper into debt. So on page 44, she's talking about blocking out criticism in your life. And she's talking about, family, friends, other people that are close to you. And she says they may express their discomfort in all sorts of ways. Anger, hurt, bafflement, criticism, snorting every time you talk about your new business or your new friends, constant remarks about how you're not the way you used to be, brow furrowing, worrying, teasing, blocking you from all your social media outlets, etc. Even though they're often doing it out of love and concern, having others smear their fear and worry all over you is the last thing you need when you're strengthening your superhero muscles to step out and take some risks, so I highly recommend keeping your mouth shut around people who are going to bring you down. This is the same shit we hear all the time from MLMs, right? People are just haters. If they're worried about you losing money in this business, it's because they're a hater. They're sipping the haterade. All right, let's talk about Jen's dismissal of mental illness. This is why I think this book should be retitled, You Are a Neurotypical. So on page 141, she said, let's say, for example, that you're depressed. Chances are pretty good that even though it feels awful, when you feel awful, you don't have to work hard or do the laundry or go to the gym. It also feels very familiar and cozy and comfortable. It gets you attention. People come in and check on you and sometimes bring food. It gives you something to talk about. It allows you not to try too hard or move forward or face possible failure. It lets you drink beer for breakfast. Jen, are you saying that people are giving themselves depression so that other people will feel bad for them and give them attention? The sentence before this in the book says we pretty much don't ever do anything that we don't benefit from in some way. Do you not know about clinical depression? Do you not know that depression is actually a medical condition that gets treated with medication? Wow, thanks, I'm cured. You are not a psychologist, Jen. Although, if we remember, Jen doesn't need to use the word not, so I think she heard you are not a psychologist and thought that meant you are a psychologist because Jen doesn't understand what negative words mean in a sentence. Let's say your story is that you can't make money. By staying broke, you get to be right. You get to be a victim, which makes you dependent on other people and gets you attention. What is Jen's obsession with thinking that people are faking their problems for attention? 157 is the page where she offended my OCD ass. The majority of the pain and suffering in our lives is caused by the unnecessary drama that we create. And I was like, I'm gonna need a source for that, Jen. Are you sure that's where the majority of problems in our lives comes from? Because the majority of problems in most people's life right now is coming from COVID. This book was written and published before COVID, but before that, the majority of problem in people's lives was in fact coming from issues like systemic cyclical poverty, clinical mental illnesses, and a lack of guaranteed health insurance in the United States. Jen just loves to do the whole, oh, you have any problem in your life? It's your fault! So this is the part that made me upset. We are so unbelievably blessed to have all the things we have, blah, 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 blah. Choosing to freak out about it all rather than enjoying living our lives is like throwing pearls before swine. Jen has clearly never seen anyone have a panic attack. Because when you freak out about something in a panic attack, that is not a choice. You feel like you're having a heart attack. I've had, I think, 2 or 3 panic attacks in my life. It feels like your heart's gonna stop. Like, I started worrying that I was gonna need to go to the hospital. You're not choosing to do that. Your body does that against your will. I'm not a doctor, but what I've learned from my psychiatrist, and if I'm reiterating anything wrong, someone please let me know in the comments below. But I've learned that, anxiety, OCD, and a lot of other mental illnesses tend to come from neurotransmitters in the brain not communicating with each other properly. And that's why there are medications that you can take, including the type I take, which is an SSRI, or a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which helps the serotonin neurotransmitter work properly in my brain. If I'm wrong about that, someone let me know. I'm not a brain expert. We can't always control our thoughts, Jen. I'm sorry. When she's like, you're choosing to freak out about this, here's an example. So, because of my OCD, I have problems where I'll be like, I used to have this big problem with, I had to grab this patch on the back of my neck. I don't do this as much now that I'm medicated, but I had a problem for a long time where I had to grab this patch on the back of my neck. And the reason was that my brain had it in me that if I didn't grab it enough and squeeze it enough, that I was going to give myself cancer. Is that logical? No, it makes no sense, but my brain was convinced of it. And I knew it was illogical while I was doing it, yet I would continue to do the compulsive behavior because that's what I have to tap this thing at this angle, otherwise everyone's gonna die. And then people would sometimes say things to me like, but that's not gonna happen. And I would be like, yes, I know, the whole point of this is that it's not only illogical, but I'm aware that it's false and that it's not true. And I'm continuing to do it anyway, and I cannot stop. That is what the mental illness is, and that is why I have to take medication. So the fact that she's like, oh, you're choosing to freak out about it, it's wow, thanks, I'm cured, Jen. If I just chose to believe I wouldn't get cancer from not squeezing my neck, which I already knew, then I wouldn't have had all those rashes on my skin. All right, the last section in Jen using toxic positivity to give terrible advice. Let's talk about her example, Henry Ford. We're going from page 191 to 193 right now in the book. She's talking about how Henry Ford, making the V8 motor, he wanted to have the engine have all 8 cylinders cast in one block. I have no idea what that means, but apparently it was a tall order because his team of engineers was like, bitch, you crazy. That's how she writes this whole book. She's like, bitch, you crazy. Don't be a lame-o. She uses the word lame-o a lot too. Like, Jen really wants to be relatable. It's cringe. Upon hearing this news, Ford told them to keep at it no matter how long it took. He was all, I don't want to see your faces till you bring me what I want. And they were all, we just proved it can't be done. And he was all, it can be done and it will be done. And they were all, cannot. And he was all, can so. And they were all, no way. And he was all, way. So they went again, time for a whole year and nothing. So they went back to Ford and there's lots of tears and finger pointing and hair pulling, and Ford sends them off again and tells them it will be done again. And then in the lab, somewhere between folding origami swans out of their notes and making fart noises every time someone mentions the word Ford, his engineers do the impossible. They discover how to make the 8-cylinder engine block. And then she says, this is what it means to make a decision for reals. When you make a no-nonsense decision, you sign up fully and keep moving toward your goal regardless of what's flung in your path. The story is Ford saying to his engineers, I need you to do this. And they said, it can't be done. And he said, yes, it can. Now, in this case, it ended up working out. This is the case of a story that you can say, yeah, maybe that is inspirational. Maybe that does work out. But what about a case where it does? I have one right at the ready to talk about now. It's called Theranos. That was a very similar story that had a very different ending. Elizabeth Holmes went to her professor at Stanford when she was 19 and was like, hey, I want to make this machine that you can prick someone's finger and do the same thing as drawing a vial of blood and analyze all the blood just from that. And all of the professors of medicine were like, that's not possible. It's literally not possible. And she was like, it will be done. She made this whole company valued for billions of dollars, tried to sell these machines to people, scammed everybody. That's an example of someone who said, no, I believe it can be done and I'm making a decision for reals and I'm not backing down. Turns out the thing was just actually impossible and a fuckload of people got fucked over because of it. A ton of people took this test and got inaccurate medical results. The entire company went under. In the meantime, if you want to know more about Theranos, check out the video by my friend Cruel World Happy Mind. I will link it in the description below. She is awesome and she did a really in-depth coverage of this. But my point is, just because this worked in this one instance doesn't mean it can't have drastic effects if you try this all the time. Let's say I jump off a cliff and I live, and I tell people, see, jumping off a cliff is fine. Not necessarily, because you're avoiding all the people who died. Ford was telling them that it will be done, and people were yelling at each other and having all this conflict. Like, honestly, this whole story sounds like Ford just being a terrible employer. And if you think about the era when this was happening, when cars were first coming on the scene, I mean, employers aren't always super nice now. There's lots of terrible conditions for workers now, but then, when, like, the labor union movement was just first starting, Jen is like, demand things of other people. Make a decision and force other people to do the work for you. What kind of bullshit story is that? Now that we've talked about Jen's complete lack of understanding of how a business works, let's move on to section 4, which is called Money is Not Sentient, Jen. Later on, I will be planning to do an entire review of the book You Are a Badass at Making Money, which is a lot, but for now, let's just talk about the money chapter in this book where she talks about getting a hold of your finances, which is the biggest hot mess I've ever heard. So page 204, Jen is talking about the time that she needed to get a new car. There were 2 cars that she could choose between, a Honda CR-V and an Audi Q5. Jen makes it very clear that she does not have the money to afford the Audi. Sounds like maybe she should get the Honda. I'm not one to talk. I don't even own a car at all. I've never owned a car. She says, blasting through this comfort zone is what I want to talk about here. Purchasing the Audi should have had me waking up screaming in the middle of the night because it cost the kind of money I would normally only consider spending on something like mandatory heart surgery. But after I bought it, I slept like a baby because once I made the decision to buy it, I also made the decision to get over my shit and become the kind of person who can make the kind of money to buy that kind of car or who can do anything else I want to do. Again, that is an example of a sentence that is technically not a run-on because of the coordinating conjunctions. However, it sounds like a hot mess because it's way too long. The editor still should have caught it. Anyway, let's talk about this story here, which is Jen knowing that she can't afford the more expensive car and still choosing to buy the more expensive car. She knew that would force her to become the kind of person who could afford it. What is even the kind of person who can afford something? This story leads into Jen's incredibly problematic views about money. Her views about money can basically be boiled down to, if you're not making money, it's because you don't want to be making money. And I'm like, Jen, literally everybody wants to make money. And she'll be like, no, people subconsciously, they say they want to make money, but subconsciously they're holding themselves back because of some subconscious belief that like something will go wrong in their life if they make more money. And I'm like, Jen, are you unaware of systemic poverty? Are you unaware of the fact that people who are born into poor families are more likely to continue to be poor in the future? And Jen will say things like, yeah, but that's just because when they heard their parents talking about money when they were kids, it gave them the wrong impression of it, so they have the wrong mindset about money going forward. And it's like, no, Jen, it's actually because people who are poor, because in the US we have school districts that are funded by property taxes. So if you can't afford to buy your own home, or you can afford to buy a home but can't afford to buy one in an area with higher property taxes, then you're probably going to start off going to a less funded public school with less resources for your education, making it harder for you to get into a higher standing college. And if you even do get into a good college, you're less likely to be able to afford the tuition or to qualify for loans, because if you have parents who don't know as much about money, they're less likely to be able to help you fill out the FAFSA forms. And then if you're less likely to have gone to a good college, you're less likely to be able to be hired for certain higher paying jobs. Plus, if you were born into a higher income family, there's a greater chance that people in your family have connections to people who have more money or who run bigger businesses and can help you get jobs through word of mouth recommendations. Basically, why do I need to explain why life is harder for poor people from the beginning? Like, Jen doesn't get this. Then she says here, I almost instantly came up with a way to pay off the Audi. And I said, which was? How did you pay it off? She continues to talk about money by saying, whether or not the money is currently in your bank account is irrelevant. I didn't have the money either when I bought my new car. And I was like, Jen, what you're talking about here is debt. You're encouraging people to go into debt, which ties in perfectly with the fact that she speaks with MLMer audiences, because MLM companies often don't care if they're pushing their employees into debt because they just want you to buy more and more inventory to keep selling. The next sentence says, when you're available to play a bigger game, i.e. quit your ho-hum job and invest in your own business, buy a house, send your kids to private school, hire a coach, hire a house cleaner, buy a new mattress, blah, 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 blah. You just threw in hire a house cleaner and hire a coach in there. Two biggest business guru cliches. Hiring a coach for what? We'll talk about this more later on when we review the money book in a future video, but Jen's story becomes clear that what she did was she had $10,000 in credit card debt and couldn't figure out how to pay it off. So she found someone to lend her $85,000, and she used that money to pay for a financial coach to learn how to pay off the $10,000. I really don't think Jen is the type of person who should be giving anyone financial advice. So when she's talking about how you need to hire a coach and hire a house cleaner, she says, you either need to pay for it with the money you have or manifest the money if you don't have it already. Gotta manifest the money, guys. And how are we going to manifest this money? Well, the ways she tells us to manifest the money are eerily similar to the ways that MLM recruiters often tell you to get the money to buy your starter kit. Here's what she says. You may have to spend the money you do have, get a loan, sell something, borrow from a friend, put it on your credit card, or manifest it some other way. I love that after getting out of credit card debt, Jen is recommending credit card debt. She's like, yeah, credit card debt's fine because you'll figure it out and it's better to have a fancier car. This advice is like so obviously bad that I can't even believe I'm having to point this out. After I took my great leap into luxury car land, I made multiple six figures with my business for the first time ever, began traveling the world on a regular basis, got my third book deal, made huge donations to causes I'm really passionate about, and helped my clients achieve similar personal bests too. And I'm like, how? How did you get more money in your business? You bought the car and then you made more money in your business, but how did you make more money in your business? What did you actually do to make more money? Jen has some more word salad on the next page where she says, money is energy like anything else, and when you're operating at a high frequency with no resistance to it and take right action, you can manifest the money you desire. She later says, our relationship with money is just as important as the action we take to manifest it, which is one reason why so many people who work their asses off their whole lives, but who have lousy energy around money, are left wondering why they have nothing to show for it. And I said, or systemic poverty, Jen. The next page, 207, is where I think Jen is starting to think money is sentient. Like, I'm picturing Jen's view of money as, like, you guys know Clippy from Microsoft Office who would pop up and be like, it looks like you're writing a document. Do you need some help with that? I'm picturing that's what money looks like to Jen, except it's like a dollar bill with, like, googly eyes on it. I think she thinks money can hear you. Because here's what she says on this page. In order to bring money joyfully into our lives, we have to understand that we're having a relationship with it, and then treat it like any other important and meaningful relationship. We need to pay attention to it, want it, nurture it, put effort into it, respect it, cherish it, love it. I'm surprised this wasn't in the Straight Girl's Guide to Sleeping with Chicks. If you're a straight woman and you want to have sex with other women, you need to shove money up her vagina. You need to stick money down her throat. You need to do body shots off of her wrapped up in little dollar bills. You need to stick 50-cent pieces on her nipples and pick them up with your teeth. Don't cancel me, this book's melted my brain, it's not my fault. Then Jen talks about what life was like back when she was broke. I was extremely poverty proud for so long. I felt like I was so much nobler in my pursuit of art and fun and altruism than those people who wasted their lives just going after money. No way in hell was I going to sacrifice my awesome life just to chase the filthy dollar. And I was like, Jen, this isn't poverty, you chose this, which is not the case for most people. Jen's story of being broke, she would be like, I was so broke, I had to choose between paying my rent and my health insurance. I couldn't do both, I had to pay one or the other. And then she'd be like, also, I was refusing to get a job because I was an artist and I only wanted to write all day and I wouldn't get a job. And instead of even doing my writing all day, I would also just like fuck off and take a trip to India for a month and just run around different countries by myself and not do any work. And I'm like, Jen, it sounds like you're just being a fucking idiot. Like, this doesn't sound like poverty. This sounds like you being stupid. I would never victim blame someone for being in poverty, but that's not the situation here. Jen makes it very clear that she came from a family who has means. She talks about how her dad loves to give her money sometimes. She talks about her childhood trips to Italy and Europe and things like that. She talks about, you know, having a rich uncle or family friends who will just give her big loans of money. It sounds like Jen had plenty of opportunities and means and instead just wasted it. And then when she was able to get it together, the reason that she was able to get it together being that she borrowed money from some of those wealthy people in her life, she then acted as if, oh, why doesn't everyone just do this? Well, Jen, because most people aren't in poverty on purpose. She then goes on about how the reason she was able to start making money was because she got over her fear of making money. She was afraid of making money because if she started making money, she might turn into an evil rich person. And I'm like, Jen, nobody's actually afraid of making money. This is a you problem. Here's another example of money isn't sentient, Jen. On page 215, money on its own means nothing. A $100 bill sitting on the table is a piece of paper. It's the energy around it that makes it relevant. The $100 could have been slipped into a birthday card from your granny, or you could have stolen it from your best friend when she wasn't looking, or you could have earned it by doing something you loved or by doing something you hated. In each situation, the energy around the money is different. And I'm like, Jen, $100 is still going to be $100. The way you feel when you look at that particular banknote might feel different to you emotionally. But that $100 is going to be worth $100 no matter where you put it. Jen then says this about money. It's all make-believe, or rather, it's what we make ourselves believe. And I was like, Jen, you need to tell that to the IRS. When you're filing your taxes, be like, I'm not paying them because money's make-believe. All right, let's do page 219, the last big part of Jen having no fucking idea how money works. So on page 219, Jen says, ever notice how when your rent is due in a week and you have no idea how you're going to pay it, or if you need a really specific amount of money for an urgent purpose, like getting a rotten tooth pulled, you always manage to somehow figure out how to get the money just in time. Usually a check that you had forgotten about arrives in the mail, or an unexpected freelance job comes in, or you suddenly develop the nerve to ask somebody for a loan, or you sell grandma's jewelry, or you compete with the 5-year-old selling lemonade down the street and make a killing. You shift from wasting your time whining and worrying because you're suddenly too busy making it happen. What actually most people do in this situation, when they need these things very badly and don't have the money, is go into debt. You should know this as you were in $10,000 of credit card debt. Most people who suddenly need an emergency surgery or who need an emergency rent payment or else they'll be evicted, they end up going into debt and credit companies take advantage of this. Jen, you are so tone deaf, I'm shocked you were able to play in a punk band back in the day. As if the money shaming weren't enough, a true #girlboss style self-help book would not be complete without some hardcore body shaming and a little internalized misogyny as a treat. Page 53, Jen says, we're born knowing how to trust our instincts, how to breathe deeply, how to eat only when we're hungry, how to not care about what anyone thinks of our singing voices, blah, 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 all these other things we don't care about as babies. Then we grow and learn from the people around us. We replace many of these primal understandings with negative false beliefs, fear, shame, and self-doubt. Then we wind up in emotional and physical pain. Then we either numb our pain with drugs, sex, booze, TV, Cheetos, etc., or we settle mediocrity. Why can't I just enjoy my drugs, sex, booze, TV, and Cheetos? Dude, this is literally the meme. This is literally the meme. All women born after 1993 can't cook all they know. This is literally that meme. Why can't I just have my hot chip and my drugs, sex, booze, and TV, and you can just leave me alone? There are certain lines in this book that are extra funny after I've read The Straight Girl's Guide to Sleeping with Chicks. Some people invest in believing they're too old to go out clubbing when they love nothing more than the boogie. Some invest in being tough and too cool for school when all they want is love and connection. Some invest in being ashamed of their sexuality instead of being their gloriously gay selves. I think the call is coming from inside the house on that one, Jen. On page 59, Jen says, the most important thing is to free yourself from the drama and the conviction that the current version of yourself is the truth. I don't care if you're all, that's easy for you to say, you don't have a nose that makes it look like someone parked a yacht on your face, because one day you could see some fancy and famous fashion model with a nose far bigger than yours who decided she was gorgeous anyway, and suddenly you'll feel beautiful and confident and all proud of your nose when just the day before you were considering getting it sawed off. Jen does not understand body dysmorphia or plastic surgery here. Guys, I'm getting plastic surgery. I am so excited for my upcoming plastic surgery, which I am going to be getting in February. I am getting these boobs right here made into small boobs. I am going to become your small titty tomboy GF. But my point is, disliking a part of your body and wanting to change it is not necessarily the result of, oh my god, I haven't seen a supermodel with this. Do you know how many objectively sexy women in media have huge titties? A lot. The answer is a lot. Do you know how many women I am very, very attracted to who have huge titties? The answer is a lot. A lot. Hundreds. So many. Yet I'm getting them taken off. Why is that? Could it be because there's more to body dysmorphia and more to the reasons why someone might want to get plastic surgery than just not seeing a model look like that, than just arbitrary beauty standards? Page 142 has like a very brief example of some body shaming. She's talking again about that whole thing where it's like, oh, obviously you're making up all your problems for attention. So she's talking about, let's say your story is that you stink at relationships. And she's talking about, here's why you might just want to keep that up. The benefits are you get to complain about always being single and get sympathy. Get the whole bed to yourself. You never have to compromise. And you don't have to shave unless it's summer. Bitch, summer just ended. Who's shaving? On page 179, Jen is talking about one of her friends from college. She's talking about how she had a #not like other girls phase, which to be fair, so did I, and we're going to talk about that. Things that bother us about other people bother us because they remind us of something we don't like about ourselves. For the longest time, one of my big stories was that being feminine was weak and annoying. Somewhere along the way, I decided that it wasn't cool or powerful to act like or be a girl, and my femininity became a part of me I was ashamed of. So this is actually incredibly incredibly common with women in the LGBT community. Once again, Jen does not identify as part of the LGBT community, and we should not say that she is part of it because she doesn't identify with it. She identifies as a straight woman who likes to fuck other women a lot. Jen, if you're watching this, can you just comment and tell me what you think the word straight means? This is incredibly common, right? I had a huge phase like this throughout my whole, like, teenage years when I was being a quirky, manic pixie dream girl all the time, which is a phase that Jen has still not grown out of, even though she's in her mid-50s. When I was in that phase in high school, I would be like, oh yeah, I'm not like other girls. I am more into these, like, masculine things. Turns out the reason for that wasn't that I didn't like femininity. It was that I liked femininity a lot on other people. This is what happens when you realize that you're fucking gay, right? Is like, oh, I'm not like other girls. Well, actually, you're not like other girls because you're attracted to other girls. I've heard this story be the same for so many people. This is incredibly common. It's also totally possible that Jen just had a not like other girls phase, not because she's gay. Maybe she really is a straight woman. Again, I can't claim to know Jen's sexuality. I can only read about all the sex she had in the book that she wrote about it. And I think it's natural that a lot of women go through a phase like that because we do go through life with this messaging that masculinity is stronger and things like that. We see that all around us in the movies, TV, books, everything we see. So I can understand how women grow up with this message that taking on a more masculine role will make you a stronger person, because that's a lot of the messaging that we're indoctrinated with from birth. And it is good to recognize when you've let that lead to misogyny or let that lead to you judging other women. So Jen actually goes into a fairly nice story here about how when she was in college, she made friends with this woman who was very feminine. She loved pink everything, so she just calls this woman Pink in the story. Then later, she talks about how one day Pink wanted to go on a road trip and visit her, and Pink was going to bring with her other friend. Jen was originally scared to meet this other friend because she assumed the other friend would be super feminine and annoying. And then it turns out that Pink's other friend is actually not super traditionally feminine, and she and Jen get along great. Sounds like a great story, but here's what Jen wrote. Imagine our delight when we discovered that we were both as macho. You take pride in being macho and having masculine qualities, which, like, girl, same, trust me. You guys see how I look. You see how I'm getting the titties removed. Jen's over here also like, well, if you're not in a relationship, maybe you don't have to shave unless it's summer. And I'm like, women don't have to shave anything ever. Okay, Jen, you can be macho. You don't describe what that means, but you're allowed to ignore gender roles when you want to, but you assume that other women are going to shave, of course. Then later on the same page, she says, I'm saying that if you actively don't like something, it's because it resonates with you on some level. It has meaning to you. Back in the early history of cinema, there was a Russian director named Kuleshov who did this experiment where he put different frames next to each other in a movie. He had a shot of a person making a neutral face. He juxtaposed that with 3 different images. The first image was of a bowl of soup, and then it juxtaposed with the man's face to show the reaction. Next we had, a casket, someone's funeral, juxtaposed with the man's face to show the reaction. They then measured the audience's responses. When they showed it with the girl with the bowl of soup, people said, wow, that man's portraying hunger in such a beautiful and subtle way. When they showed the casket, they said, wow, you can really feel the sadness on his face. The point being that the conclusions we draw from something are often based on what they're juxtaposed with. Now just keep that in mind as I juxtapose that story with another thing that I'm about to juxtapose. Let's read this line from Jen again. I'm saying that if you actively don't like something, it's because it resonates with you on some level. While some people define themselves as bisexual, many people look down upon the term as indecisive. I'm saying that if you actively don't like something, it's because it resonates with you on some level. While some people define themselves as bisexual, many people look down upon the term as indecisive. I'm saying that if you actively don't like something, it's because it resonates with you on some level. Now that we've gotten through a lot of the misogyny, a lot of the body shaming, let's move into section 6. The casual racism. On page 130, Jen is talking about the time she took a trip to India. And in this section, she says, I didn't have to darken the doorway of an ashram or stick a red dot on my forehead or partake in any of the other of thousands of spiritual options the country is famous for offering. Who needs them? As far as I'm concerned, you can learn pretty much everything you need to know about spirituality and life by taking a 12-hour bus ride through India during wedding season. Okay, I'm just gonna leave that there. That stands on its own. On page 131, the next page, she continues to talk about India, and it seems that while she was there, she really didn't make an effort to learn the culture based on her being like, weddings in India traditionally involve a ceremony that lasts for days. It's complete with all these things. It's complete with a bunch of guys carrying what look like table lamps on their heads. When we finally did get out of town, we kept pulling over to let random people on and off in the middle of nowhere have some tea, a smoke, a chat, maybe light a fire in the brush, in a ditch, or strap giant burlap sacks full of something large and bulbous to the roof. She then later says we were careening through the narrow dirt streets of tiny villages, Bollywood music crackling over the radio while people, goats, and monkeys leapt out of the way, slowing down only for the almighty holy cow. It feels like she's trying to like exoticize another country. Does that feel that way to you guys? I don't know. If you're from India and you're like, no, this is fine, let me know in the comments below. If you're from India and you're like, no, this is completely offensive, also let me know that in the comments below. But I've never been to India, so I can't really speak to it, but from what I read here, it really feels like she's trying to like exoticize another country and be like, look, they're so different from us in another country. I'm not going to make any effort to actually learn what any of the things are in this culture, but I will act like I know everything about them while being like, look, they're so different. Like, it feels really, voyeuristic. On page 138, she talks about Ray Charles. She says, whenever I become impressed by a particularly creative array of new excuses I've come up with, or start to organize an elaborate pity party for myself, I turn to Ray Charles. I don't often listen to his music, but I always think about Ray when I need a kick in the butt. He was a broke, blind minority who was orphaned by the age of 15 and raised in... I'm not gonna say that. Also, she literally mentions that she doesn't listen to his music. She just uses him as an inspirational story. She's like, Ray Charles was blind and he was black. If a blind black guy can do it, why can't I do it? I'm gonna boil down all of this person's accomplishments to just the things about them that had them at a systemic disadvantage. I'm gonna use this person as inspiration porn, even though I don't even listen to his music. He doesn't even appreciate him for the thing that he's known for the passionate thing that he made his life out of. Her whole point of the story is that he was able to overcome the obstacles that were put in place and make amazing music. And instead, she's over here talking about how the main thing she remembers about him is those disadvantages and doesn't even listen to his music. How is this an inspirational story? Jen, stop fetishizing people of color. All right, on page 221, we're going to go back to that section we were talking about when we were in the grammar mistakes section. And she's talking about how you need to talk to yourself when you want to manifest money or whatever. And she's saying something that you could write in your journal to help you manifest things and act like you already have it is, I'm so grateful for this $150,000 by December 31st that allows me to take my family on a vacation to Bali and renovate our kitchen and donate money to build schools in Kenya. I see myself in the jungle with my kids and my wife. We're staying at my favorite hotel. I feel so happy for being able to give my children this incredible life-changing experience and for bringing my wife such joy. I can also see the kitchen and how happy it's made my wife to finally have it. I see the faces of the kids in Kenya as right on the chalkboard in the school I've helped pay for. I feel such joy from being able to make a difference in their lives. I believe that this is white saviorism, where you're like, I want to help these people because it's going to make me feel good and fulfilled. It's not a true act of like, I see someone who needs my help and I'm going to do what I can to help them. It's more of, I want to manifest this money because if I donate it, I'm going to feel so good from helping those people. That's basically what this says. You're taking a vacation to Bali. That's just like, I feel like that's a negative white people cliche. Guys, I'm white, so I can make jokes about white people. It's okay. I wrote in my annotation here, this is the whitest shit I've ever read and I'm from Polish Chicago. And on that note, let's move to section 7. Checkmate, atheists. Review is getting long as fuck, so let's just go through this section quickly. Page 30, Jen says, wherever you happen to stand on the God issue, let me just say that this whole improving your life thing is going to be a lot easier if you have an open mind about it. Call it whatever you want. God, goddess, the big guy, the universe, source energy, higher power, the grand poobah, gut, intuition, spirit, the force, the zone, the Lord, the vortex, the mother lode. It doesn't matter. Personally, I find the God word to be a tad too loaded. I prefer source energy. Whatever you choose to call it isn't important. What is important is that you start to develop an awareness of and relationship with the source energy that's surrounding you and within you. Checkmate, atheists. Also, I didn't even notice there was another fucking comma splice there. Personally, I find the God word to be a tad too loaded, comma. I prefer source energy. That's a run-on sentence, Jen. How often do you stop and notice how genius our universe is? with all its moving parts and mathematical perfection and chemical reactions and food chains and gravity. This display of astonishing brilliance didn't just splat down into beingness by random dumb luck. It was thought up. Nature is a smoothly running machine, created by a universal intelligence, where nothing goes to waste. It all has a place and a purpose, and it all works together in its intricately interwoven and compatible way. Checkmate, atheists! I can't argue with that. Also on this page, she gives me another OCD trigger where she says, I think, therefore I can create awesomeness or horrendousness, but the bottom line is that it's through our thoughts that we create our realities. Tell that to people with intrusive thoughts. Now, if by chance any of the things I have intrusive thoughts about actually do happen, I'm gonna suddenly start thinking it was my fault because of the way I didn't manifest properly. If you're still watching, thank you so much for being here this whole time. Please don't forget to check out my small business linked in the description below, Forever Home Friends, a series of books and plushies, all based on real rescue dogs and their stories of getting adopted. If you like my snarky, memeing kind of way of talking, you'll like the new book I just put out called Cancel Sean Boston. And if you like bisexual visibility, then check out my novel 90s Kids. I will see you guys again on Monday. In the meantime, please keep on supporting small businesses and have a fantastic Friday. Bye everyone.
Get you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should take up lesbianism.
Chicago.
You guys asked for it.